Learning to string your own tennis racket is a vital skill that can save you money, deepen your understanding of tennis, and make you an even better player. Learning how to string my own racket elevated me from an intermediate middle school tennis player to a 4-time tennis state champion, all because I knew how to alter my racket to meet my game. When stringing your racket, you're going to need these basic tools: an awl, some string cutters, and pliers. I prefer the bent ones. On top of that, you're going to need the stringing machine of choice. I am using this stand crank machine. To start off, we're going to remove the old strings from the racket. But before we can do that, we want to make note of how many mains and crosses this racket has. The amount of mains is the amount of vertical strings in the racket. So if you count across, for this racket we have 16. And then the amount of crosses is how many horizontal strings we have. And in this case, it is 19. Count up to the middle of the crosses and make your first cut. After you do that, move one cut up, one cut to the left, one cut to the bottom, and one cut to the right. Do this until you get to the outer edge of the frame. Now, once all the strings are cut, you can push the strings to the outer edge of the racket and remove them from the side. Once all the strings are removed from the racket, we can then mount the racket onto the machine. This is different for every machine, but for this 6-point mounting machine, it's about the same for all the other 6-point mounting machines. Start by lining up the middle of the bottom of the racket with one of the pins in the middle or top of the stringing machine, and then line it up parallel with the tip of the racket. Once it's on, tighten the mount to hold the racket in place. Once the racket is in place, we can then turn both of the side mounts at the exact same time to then hold the racket down completely. You want to make sure these are finger tight because you don't want to bend the frame. Do this for the top and the bottom. Now set your tension on your machine. This is also different for every machine, but for this one we have a digital display right here and a knob on the side that adjusts the tension. I'll be stringing at 53 pounds today. Now open your string pack. Cut the zip tie and unravel your string looking for any bends or kinks. Now we want to cut our 40-foot string pack in half, and to do this, hold both ends together and make your way to the other end and then cut where the string meets your hand. Now once you've measured out about 21 feet of string, we can then start the mains. When we start the mains, we have to make note of whether we start at the top or bottom. And the way to determine that is checking how many string holes are in the throat of the racket. In this racket, we can see there's 8. However, in this racket, there's 6. If you have 6, you'll start at the bottom. And if you have 8, you'll start at the top. Since the racket we're stringing has 8 holes in the throat, we're going to be starting at the top. So feed one end of the string through the outside edge of the frame and then through the corresponding parallel hole in the throat. Do that for the other side. Once it's through both sides, you want to pull the string so it's even on both sides, and then you want to clamp it on one of the strings at the end you started at. Every stringing machine has different clamps that are built in, so consult your manual to adjust your clamps and learn how to use them. I also like to use a starting clamp. This is not mandatory, but I feel it has better tension maintenance. Now once everything is clamped up, we can then start stringing. So you're going to pull the opposite main from what you clamped and pull tension on it. And once you pull tension on that main, you're going to use the second clamp on your machine to clamp at the end you pulled the string through. Once you clamp the string, then release the tension. You then can continue this pattern for 3 mains at a time on each side. You want to do 3 mains at a time because it maintains tension balance on the frame and doesn't cause any extra damage. As you can see, I've now strung 3 mains to one side, so then I'm going to switch to the other side. When I pull this tension, I keep the clamp that I started with, and after I pull tension, I'll remove my starting clamp, and then I'll move this clamp to then the edge of where the string exited, and now I'll continue that same pattern for 3 mains to the other side and then keep switching. Once you are stringing your last mains, be mindful of main skips. These are holes in the racket that aren't meant for mains. They're very easily pointed out though because they angle horizontally instead of vertically. Once you finish stringing your mains, double check that you did them right by counting and making sure they match the count that you made at the beginning. We have 16 mains here, so we're good to go. Now we can tie off our mains. And the way to do that is feeding the edge of the string through a previous main and tying a knot around that main. Usually the tie-off holes are marked on the frame with either the words tie off or a little dot. To tie this knot, we're going to wrap the string around the main, go over the main, under and through the loop, and then we're going to do the exact same thing again and create a double knot. Pull on that knot very tightly, and then you can even pull tension on it to make sure it's secure. Once that knot is secure, clip the excess string and you finished one side of your mains. Once we finish the mains, grab the other half of your string pack. You're then going to feed through about 5 inches of string through a hole or a main marked cross start. You're then going to tie the exact same knot that you did and pull. You're not going to pull tension on it though, you're only going to pull with your hand. Now once that knot is about set, we're then going to feed through the other end of the string through the first cross. Once we feed through, you're going to want to start a pattern under the mains of over and under. So we're going to weave this string through the main pattern. This is tricky at first, but you want one finger on top and a few fingers on the bottom to help weave the string through. Once you weaved the string through, pull it through the other cross end that is parallel to the one you started in. Now, a check to make sure that you weaved correctly is that the first main that you weaved, whether it's an over and an under, should be opposite from the last main you weaved. So if the first main I weaved was an over, my last main I weaved should be an under. You can then pull through the string while shuffling the string down the mains. This helps prevent notching and friction that'll cause premature breakage in the string. Now feed through one more cross. The over-under pattern matches both vertically and horizontally. So if this main that you strung last was an under, the one below it should be an over. So make sure that you adjust the pattern accordingly. Once you weaved that cross through the string bed, pull it through the corresponding parallel string hole, and do not pull the string all the way through. Leave about 2 feet of string so then you can pull tension on the previous cross. By pulling tension on that first cross, you have now pulled tension on your start knot, and then you can clip the excess and continue your crosses. Continue to weave the string through and pulling tension on the previous cross. When I pull tension on my crosses, I like to squeeze the cross all the way up as far as it can go. So when I pull tension on it, it ends up as straight as possible. Once you've made it to the last cross, you're going to weave it through exactly the way you did the other ones. Still, make sure you're conserving the pattern as it goes both horizontally and vertically. Once that cross is weaved through, pull tension on the previous cross and clamp just like normal. And then for the last cross, simply pull it all the way through and pull tension on it just like you pulled tension on the mains. Once you've done that, you can then tie off your crosses just like the way you tied off your mains. Find a hole either labeled tie off or whatever hole you can fit the string into. Pull the string all the way through and then pull it over, under, and through the hole twice to tie a knot and pull tension. Once you've done that, clip the excess string, unclamp your racket from the machine. Your racket is now finished and ready for play. Once the racket is strung, there's no way to actually change the tension. You'll have to either cut the strings or wait for them to break. However, now that you know how to string your own racket, you can save so much money and also play around with different string setups. There's different shapes of strings and different tensions that you can play around with as well that affect your game all in different ways.